So, if each of you would introduce yourselves and just very briefly talk about why you're running. Would you start?
You bet. I'd be happy to start. Thanks for having me. I am a 42-year-old Mike Kiernan. I first met you guys probably when I was 28 years old, when I first ran for the city council. My life has been dramatically different over the past, I don't know, decade since I last saw you folks. The reason why I'm running for office, for the last 2 years I've been a stay-at-home dad. My wife works nights, and we always wanted a baby. No one thought who was going to take care of the baby. So as we figured that out, I've really kind of been removed and had the privilege to look in from the outside. And I'm really tired of politics. I'm this coming from a former state party chair and someone who's run campaigns. It's sick. I mean, it's dysfunctional. I don't like what I see in Washington. I'm not particularly fond of what I've seen in the State House. And I think City Hall can do better than that. And that we should pay very close attention to keep city government nonpartisan. Whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, a Green Party candidate, City Hall should work for everybody. What kind of pushed me over the edge, people have certain things in life events, I call them, that make you think. One was the birth of my son, and the other one was the death of my father in February. He was a farmer, and he was also a county supervisor. He never had any aspirations to run for Congress or the U.S. Senate, wasn't a stepping stone, but he cared about people, and he understood that the local government is arguably to him more important than those things that go on in Washington. So when a father got shot in front of his 3 kids, our car got broke into, and we had some issues. I thought, well, maybe it's time that, I've sat on the sidelines, maybe it's time to get in and have that conversation. It's certainly, Christine Hensley has served the city well for 24 years. It's a big job to fill. I know it. I've been there. I can hit the ground running. But I feel that with her leaving, it's going to be a large hole. It's a large vacancy. Whether you agreed with her on all the issues or not, we worked together on some and disagreed on others. But no one can argue the fact that she was a workhorse, and a lot of what we see here in the city, it can be attributed to some of her hard work. You drive around downtown Des Moines, I was proud to be part of really getting this off the ground, whether you look at Gateway West, Court Avenue, East Village, the projects go on, and I was proud to be part of the city council at that time to help spur that economic growth.
Thank you. Josh?
I'm Josh Mandelbaum, and a little bit about me. I grew up in this community and had a lot of great opportunities going through the public schools, being shaped by the neighborhoods and what this community has to offer. And my wife and I are raising our 2 kids here. And when I think about it, this community's provided opportunity to my family for generations. It goes all the way back to my great-great-grandfather, Julius, who came here as a German-Jewish immigrant at a time when he didn't necessarily have opportunity everywhere. But in Des Moines, he did. He was able to open a store, make a better life for himself and his family, and ultimately generations of his family. And that, to me, is what a great American city can do. It can provide opportunity to everyone who wants to be a part of the community, who wants to raise a family there, help build the community, retire there, regardless of their circumstances, regardless of what brings them there. And that's actually one of the things that's great about sharing a stage in so many of these forums with Abshir, is that's part of what we're trying to create, a community that works for everyone and provides opportunity for everyone. And that's really what big picture motivates me. And I come at this with a lot of policy experience. I did a policy fellowship at the U.S. Department of Transportation in the Secretary's Policy Office. I spent 4 years working in Governor Vilsack and Lieutenant Governor Peterson's policy staff. And I currently work as an environmental attorney at a nonprofit doing clean water and clean energy issues. And in all of those cases, you're working on solving problems and trying to make lives better and the community stronger. And I've been talking about a pretty broad range of issues as part of this campaign. Everything from what it takes to stand up for the interests of residents of Des Moines in the ongoing water quality debate, to how we keep our community safe and get police and fire the resources that they need to effectively do their job. And I've had a lot of conversations with frontline first responders, and I've been endorsed by the police and firefighters in this race. And it's also talking about how we create strong neighborhoods. And that includes everything from taking care of basics like roads and infrastructure to thinking about the relationship between strong neighborhoods and strong neighborhood schools. And there's a lot that we can do from a planning and coordination perspective to make things work better between council and school board. And then we should also be thinking about how we use city assets like parks and libraries to complement what goes on in schools and neighborhoods. And then a final piece of creating strong neighborhoods is thinking about how we take some of the success we're experiencing downtown and extend that out into neighborhoods. And that to me is a focus on creating strong, vibrant, walkable, bikeable, transit accessible corridors like Ingersoll, University, Southwest 9th, Fleur. We have tremendous opportunities to make those corridors safer, more walkable, bikeable, and create places where small businesses thrive and create the uniqueness and character that makes neighborhoods and communities great. And that's what I want to focus on, and that's why I hope to have the Register's endorsement.
Thank you. I'm sure before you begin, I wanted to extend our condolences to you on the death of your brother-in-law and the tragedy for your family. So I really appreciate that you took the time to come in today.
It's my pleasure to be here. And before I even go in about my candidacy, I want to take this time to educate the community here in Des Moines and the rest of the country. The violence and the atrocity that took place in Mogadishu, the city I was born in, several miles actually from the home I was born in, is absolutely atrocious. Our family lost a loved one. It was a tragedy nonetheless, and it underscores the dangerous times that we live in, but also more importantly, the humanity of this country. We have an immigration policy that denies refugees from my home country of Somalia entrance because this administration believes that all immigrants are dangerous, that we cause crime and that we cause havoc in this nation, which is not the truth. And for the people that have been suffering for the last 27 years since I was born, they don't have an avenue out anymore. My family has been lucky to leave the country. We came to this country during a time where immigrants were welcomed, and my country was not banned because of political expediency. And I just wanted to urge everyone who can to go to the GoFundMe page and support the victims of that blast who are going to be disabled for the rest of their lives, to support the family members who've lost breadwinners, and also to show solidarity with people. And we have a hashtag going on Facebook and Instagram called Pray for Mogadishu. So if you can, send a message of love out. Communities are suffering back home where I was born in Mogadishu, and we could really use some love right now. So if you can, donate $1, $10, whatever it is, but also send words of encouragement. And I'd encourage everyone in this community to stand with immigrants, because whether they're from Somalia, Iraq, Sudan, Nicaragua, or Honduras, violence is violence. Death is a fact of life for millions of people. And we need to have a discussion on what it means to be American and what it means to be generous in letting people into this country who are seeking refuge. So I just wanted to thank you for giving me the opportunity to interject there. My name is Abshir Omar, and I live downtown about 3 blocks from the Register building. And I was born in Somalia in 1991 during the Civil War. My father died 2 months before I was born, and my mother fled the country with my siblings and I to a refugee camp in Kenya. And while we were there, we didn't have access to adequate health care, clean water. We were in a camp surrounded by UN soldiers protecting us from rebels. And my family was very lucky. During the Clinton administration, we were accepted as refugees to come to the United States. And we arrived in New York, and then we resettled in San Diego with my aunt for a couple months, but finally living in Seattle. And while there, I had the opportunity of getting a world-class education, having access to healthcare where, I could live a healthy, long life, or I was able to, experience the American dream. I remember growing up in a shelter the first year we were there in Seattle, my mom working 3 jobs just to support the family, not taking care of herself, not furthering her own education, but worrying about the future of her children. And I graduated high school there, and I did my first year of school, and then I transferred to Iowa State. And really the story of my family has been one of prosperity. It has been one of hope. We've been able to experience that dream, the American dream, where you come from nothing, you work hard, you put the time in, and you can achieve. And I'm so lucky to have that story. But for millions of people coming into this country today, that's not the story that we live in. We have an economy that's not working for everyone, where people are working 2 and 3 jobs and still not able to afford housing, healthcare, and basic food for their families. We have an administration that is targeting immigrants from Latin America, profiling them, breaking up families. We have a city in which people who look like me, who are black and brown, have a different reality of experience with law enforcement than most other people do. So this campaign was not one that I chose to increase my standing in the community or start off moving forward in my political career, but it was a reaction to the facts of life in this country. We have a Des Moines that reaches the list for wealthiest city in the nation, best place for young professionals to move to, best place to start a business. That reality is there for only a small subsect of our community. And we are not working as a city to empower all the residents in this community, whether they're people who are established 5th generations like Josh, who's doing wonderful things in our community fighting for clean water, or for immigrants like me, who came in '95. We have to stand up as a city and fight for the working class, making sure that we're supporting a living wage for people, that those who are working in the engines of Des Moines' economy should be able to live in this city, that they have access to adequate and affordable housing, that when we have interactions with police on the street, that we can expect a fair and free, experience where we don't fear for our lives, we don't fear for our safety, we don't fear for mistreatment, as we've seen many residents in the city do constantly, where our police officers violate the civil rights of Des Moines residents, are found guilty in court, and our police department and our Civil Service Commission reinstates those same offenders. And I came into this experience, charred by the Donald Trump presidency. Many people were shocked, but it's a reality that's set in home with me. He has demonized my people directly, immigrants. He has demonized Somali immigrants specifically. And I remember when the Muslim ban came down earlier this year, a couple friends of mine came together and we said we needed to stand up to Donald Trump's rhetoric, and we hosted a protest. And we were only expecting about 100 to 200 people to show up. But we were shocked by the outpouring of concern and love from the community, and 1,500 people showed up to the state capitol to protest in the cold winter that everyone in this country has a right to be here, that human dignity and life cannot be curtailed because of someone's immigration status or where they come from. And I stood up as a vocal opponent to white supremacy, white nationalism, and hate and bigotry that we're seeing in the state. And I've been working with the Council on American Islamic Relations in Iowa to fight against exactly that, what we see. We think of Iowa as a place, that's welcoming, that's Iowa nice. But the reality of fact is Iowa is #1 for racial discrimination in this country in our criminal justice system, as the ACLU has reported. And my goal on City Council is to change the paradigm, change this discussion, and make sure everyone in the city feels welcome and everyone has an opportunity to succeed.
Thank you. Michael, you talked about crime as being one of the motivators for your campaign.
Yeah.
We heard yesterday that it appears that the police department is going to be closer to full force after the next academy is completed. What are some of the other, so many of you have mentioned, many candidates have mentioned that as being one of the solutions. What do you think are some of the other solutions to addressing crime in Des Moines, especially some of the violent crime?
I think that one of the things that needs to we need to have a conversation. I'm not saying we have all the solutions, but sometimes it starts with having a larger conversation. I think you have a mental health care crisis that the Des Moines Police Department's on the front lines taking care of. Now, you know, whether that's the federal government's fault or the state government's fault for their cutbacks, I can assure you that probably 40% of the Des Moines Police Department's time is taken up with mental health issues. And it becomes very complex for the Des Moines Police Department to deal with those situations. So I think that conversation needs to exist. You can say, well, we can train our officers to deal with it. We'll give them so many hours of training. But at some point, the city has to step in and address this mental health issue, because even with the right amount of training for the police department, it's a burden that takes away from them dealing with violent crimes and other crises like the opioid crisis. Mm-hmm. So I believe that has to be addressed in this city. I think you got to talk about it and what that means. You know, if you're in a car accident, they take you to the emergency room. You have a broken arm, they take you to the emergency room. If you have a mental health issue, you start to slip through the cracks, and then it's become cyclical. So they arrest them because there's nothing else a lot of times they can do. And then they get out, and most of them suffer from substance abuse issues, and it's just a cycle that continues. And until this community gets its hands around it, that will be one of the biggest things the Des Moines Police Department struggles with in its budget and how to deal with all the other things on their plate, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sure you talked a lot about the police. What have you had discussions with Chief Wingert about some of your concerns with the department, and what do you propose that the department do about that?
Yeah, I haven't had a sideline discussion with Chief Wingert, but earlier this summer I was invited to the hate forum that was organized by the Department of Justice and the FBI, and Chief Wingert was on the panel with me. And he was asked questions about hate crimes. And during that panel, he said that in his research, in the last 5 years, he could not find a single documented case of a hate crime occurring in Iowa, or central Iowa to be specific. And that's not the case. Two of his officers, Officer Tyson Tutt and Joshua Judd, are being charged with planting evidence on a Des Moines resident. When they arrested Kyle Weldon, they planted a...
How's that a hate crime?
For me, when I look at hate crimes, you know, we look at, you know, the KKK or white supremacists coming out and, you know, disturbing public peace and making people unwelcome. But when you have officers who have, you know, authority and discretion, using their powers to, you know, violate civil rights of individuals, I consider that a hate crime. You know, you're taking someone, whether it's me as an African American driving down Southeast 14th, being pulled over for absolutely no reason and being let go 10 minutes later. You know, you're using your power and discretion to stop someone based on your own biases, of whether someone is black, an immigrant, a Mexican, and stopping them and saying, I'm going to use my authority to harass you, to take away your civil rights. I consider that a hate crime. So when we have officers in Des Moines harassing residents constantly, are being found guilty of that harassment and not having any repercussions, where the Civil Service Commission reinstates individuals after those things happen. For example, we had Officer Del Tavik, who was found guilty of excessive force, assaulting an individual, and was fired by Judy Bradshaw, the former chief of police. His firing was upheld by the Iowa State Supreme Court, and the civil service reinstated him. So where do you see fairness in our judicial system or in our police department? He was fired by a police chief, his firing was upheld by the Supreme Court, and our Civil Service Commission found it fit for him to be reinstated. You know, we have a system in Des Moines that looks wonderful from the outside. We have a veneer of a picturesque city that's, you know, progressive and that's moving forward with human rights. But when you really look at the facts of it, we have a city that's not being working for the interests of its resident. And in an interview with the Des Moines Register, I think Chief Wingert was quoted as saying, you know, when Officer Cody Grimes was being questioned about his 4 strikes, he called it a garden variety incident. That was a direct quote from the Des Moines Register. So my experience with Chief Wingert is, you know, he's not first willing to admit that there's an issue. You cannot address a problem until you yourself say that there's an issue in our police force and we need to address it. And that's the discussion that the City Council needs to have with the police department. We need to use our authority and our responsibility to keep him accountable, to keep leadership in our police department accountable. Because until and unless we can do that, we're going to have a police department that has a culture that is laissez-faire, that's abusing the rights of residents. And I'm not saying all officers are bad. I know many of them are my personal friends. I've gotten to know them over the couple of years, and they're wonderful people. But we have to create a culture that understands if you violate someone's civil rights, we will hold you accountable. And that's not the reality that we see in Des Moines. Time and time again, officers found guilty of violating civil rights or criminal mischief or excessive force, and they're getting reinstated. So we need to change that paradigm in our police force.
Mm-hmm. Josh, if you're on the city council, how do you deal with some of these concerns, both the concerns about excessive police force and violating civil rights, and the concerns of many residents about increasing crime?
Yeah, I think it starts with resources, because that has an impact on everything else that the department is able to do. So for example, if you're short-staffed and you don't have enough people out on patrol, it's hard to remove officers to allow them to go get the training that they need to be more effective officers. And that can be everything from crisis intervention training to address mental health issues, to thinking about things like de-escalation training, all the types of resources and training that will make our officers better and our police force run better. And so that's an issue from the start. And I also think there are questions about how you prioritize resources internally. So I think we should be focused on the crimes that matter most, and that's everything from violent crime, domestic assault, sexual assault, gun crimes, and not on things like low-level drug possession, which also has a disproportionate impact on communities of color and low-income folks, and not on, for example, federal immigration issues. That's not something that we should be focused on and using limited police resources on. And when you start focusing on the right things and making clear our policies, that's part of how you also build a relationship with the community, because we need to work with the larger community and have people comfortable talking with our officers and engaging with the police force and thinking about how we work together to solve public safety issues. So that's a piece of it too. And then one of the things that I think also makes a difference is how we take care of and treat our police. They are frontline first responders. They deal with a lot of really challenging situations. And one of the things that we know from Department of Justice studies is police as a profession are more at risk for suicide. And that's a combination of things. Mm-hmm. It's a high-stress profession. It's a profession where they see traumatic incidents all the time, and they have ready access to a firearm. So they're at higher risk. And so one of the things, by looking at how we treat our officers and getting them good health care and mental health coverage, and the better that our police force understands their own mental health issues, that helps police understand what other people in the community are going through, and that makes them better officers. So there are a range of things that we can be doing and talking about and thinking about that I think will have benefits.
Thank you. Others at the table can jump in if they have questions.
Did you want to say something?
I just would capitalize on that too, to say that, I know that the city's moving forward with a civil rights, human rights director that they've hired, coordinator. I think that'll be a big benefit to the city of Des Moines. That's something that they have not had in the past. But some of this, as Josh points out, some of this is community-based policing is so important. Some of the programs that have really kind of gone by the wayside are like PAL, the Police Athletic League. Why some people would say, well, that's just sports, so what's that matter? It's a lot more than that. Police officers got to know the families, they got to know the kids in the community, and they build a relationship, and it's all based on trust. And I think that the Des Moines Police, the other thing I would say is that the Des Moines Police Department has a perfect opportunity right now to really help address some of these issues that Abshir is talking about, because they can add more minorities to the force. And by doing that, that really becomes your voice with the community over the next 20, 25 years. That becomes Chief Wingert's problem, is that you're not hiring like you're running a pizza shop. You're hiring somebody that's going to be there for 20 or 25 years. So you want to make sure you make the right hires. So I kind of wanted to, throw a couple things out there that I thought were important too.
This is a question for all of you, but I'm going to start with Josh, because you work with water quality issues. I'm wondering what your opinion of the Des Moines City Council's handling of the Waterworks lawsuit was, because there were a lot of bad feelings about that, and I watched the City Council meeting, and it was a very tense one, and I wonder if you could just comment on that.
Yeah, and I actually think it started before the Des Moines Waterworks legislation came up, and it goes back to how the council handled dealing with the waterworks after they filed the lawsuit. And one of the things that motivated me to look at this race is we had a council member that was involved with the Partnership for Clean Water, which is essentially a Farm Bureau front group that attacked Des Moines Waterworks and Bill Stowe from the get-go, spent $1 million on an ad campaign against them, and essentially defended status quo and head in the sand approach to water quality. And I think that permeated the council's approach when the retaliatory Des Moines Waterworks legislation came up. And I should add, part of my day job, I was actually up at the Capitol testifying against that legislation. And I think the council should have taken a position against that legislation. And quite honestly, the council still has that opportunity because that legislation is still up for debate and is still live when the legislature comes back in January. And my hope is that by changing the seat, and I hope this is something that both Michael and Abshir would agree to, because I think it's important that whoever is in this seat, and it changes, there were only 4 votes to register in support of that legislation, and the person in this seat who represents the Des Moines Waterworks should bring that up for a vote again, and the council should change its position and register as opposed to that bill. That to me is a pretty clear step, and we should continue to advocate for water quality and improving our water quality, because Des Moines residents, every single person who lives in this ward, relies on Des Moines Waterworks for safe drinking water. And on top of that, beyond just having the opportunity for safe drinking water, we sit on 2 rivers here, and that's a recreational opportunity as well, and something that folks in our community are talking about as one of those things that we can take another step towards making this a great place to live. We can't do that if the water isn't clean and people don't want to get out on that water. So there are a lot of different impacts here, and it should be the Des Moines Council's role to be an advocate for the interests of residents of Des Moines and for clean water.
Thanks. Mike, yeah.
How about the same question with the waterworks?
Yes, same.
I'll wait for Abshir, but I don't think any of us disagree. I mean, I vehemently disagree with Christine Hensley on her stance on the waterworks. I think Bill Stowe does a tremendous job leading the waterworks. I worked with him for years. I think the challenge becomes, for many of us, we'd obviously like to do more that's not in our control. I agree with Josh. We can put that vote up and change the registration on the bill. But the thing that becomes tough, just like a lot of the issues on the federal side, is that the city can only do so much. Like I know that when I'm out going door to door and talking with people, now people say, is my drinking water safe? And I say, yes, it's safe. It's some of the best drinking water in the country. So I want to make sure, being on the front lines in government, you also want to make sure that people understand the issues that we're talking about and have clarity to those issues and don't get confused. And I feel like since this debate has come up, it's been a very important debate, but a lot of people have been confused and maybe not understand, well, is our water not safe? And I think we all agree on the waterworks issue, but I think it's very important for all of us to be united in the message that our water is safe to drink, our water is clean, and that people don't have to be worried about that.
So
Yeah.
sure.
And I completely agree with Josh and Michael on the issue. Des Moines residents have a right to clean water. And right now in Iowa, we have 750 bodies of water that are polluted and contaminated. You know, the DNR in a report said 72% of our waterways are very poor, and fair. And we have these large corporate ag institutions that are dumping millions and millions of gallons of manure with nitrates and phosphates into our water system. And then Des Moines ratepayers are having to pay for that. And for City Council to abdicate its authority on that issue and being a force on the Capitol to fight for that issue and protect Des Moines residents, for Des Moines to opt out like that is, a shame. And I will support what Josh said. Des Moines standing up and registering against that bill. Des Moines residents should not have to pay for the cost of that cleanup. We should be lobbying in the state capitol more vehemently than we have before. And also on the other side, what is Des Moines doing to pollute water going downstream from us? For several years, I've worked as a winter operations manager for both American and United Airlines. And in the winter season, we dump thousands and thousands of gallons of glycol into our water systems. And as is clear from this previous week, our infrastructure at the airport is very bad. We had a runway that flooded. So not only do we have weak infrastructure in Des Moines, we are polluting ourselves water that's going downstream, and we need to find better solutions of containment. And first of all, cleaning the water that comes into our water system, working with Bill Stowe and Des Moines Waterworks, and having the city stand up for Des Moines residents and our local water utility. We need to fight against regionalization. Our water utility is working really well. We need to keep it local, we need to keep it democratic, and we need to keep it out of the hands of Farm Bureau and Big Ag in Iowa. And that's what I would say. But Des Moines residents have that right to clean water. When I was growing up in a refugee camp, our water was from contaminated wells. People in our camp were suffering from cholera and and things of the like. So for Des Moines residents to have health issues related to water quality in 2017 in the richest nation in the country is absolutely ridiculous. And for us to have to pay to clean that water that someone else contaminated. So and I agree with Josh's work, and the city needs to step up and be a voice on the Capitol to fight against, first of all, corporate ag.
The cities and suburbs are right now talking about regionalization. Why are you opposed to that?
I think our waterworks right now is working well. There's been talk about regionalization, but I think Des Moines is better served by a more locally controlled water utility. When we spread out, our sewer systems are connected, like Connie Bozen always speaks about. Connecting our water supply in a regional setting might be conducive, but we're going to have to take a very close look at that and take direction from Des Moines Waterworks. Other than Josh, who's a water quality expert, me and Michael, we come into this, and the rest of the council, we're not water quality experts.
Well,
so
I think the waterworks is in support of regionalization at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, Lynn, I think that's an important question, and I think discussions about regionalization are appropriate, and the key, there need to be several things that happen. One, you need the water quality experts at the table, and I think that's what has happened. Not what has happened, it's what was going on before the legislature introduced the bill, while the legislature introduced the bill, and it's continued after. The folks at the waterworks have always been willing to talk to partners in other communities, and I think that is a key part of any conversation about regionalization. The priority is keeping our drinking water safe and keeping the experts who know how to keep our drinking water safe involved, so that whatever the system is, that priority is the focus. And then the next piece is making sure that Des Moines residents are treated fairly in the process, because Des Moines residents have invested in the assets of Des Moines Waterworks. And my understanding is right now, the way the proposal is working is that there's not a transfer of assets, and it's still Des Moines residents and ratepayers who have oversight and control over that. And in conversations going forward, that needs to be a principle in any regionalization system. So I think if those issues are addressed, conversations can move forward and can be productive.
Are you in support of regionalization, or where do you stand? I mean, this issue's been around for a
Well,
while.
it has. I mean, this is the benefit from, I guess, a little bit of me being on the city council before and working with local governments. And I think this gets to the point where it's very tough out there for the normal person to get through all of this information, understand exactly what is going on with the waterworks. Most people don't understand that the Des Moines Waterworks is a separate entity that was, ironically enough, put into a separate entity to provide clean, safe drinking water and stay out of politics. So here's a couple of things that I think are important. One, it is the Des Moines Waterworks. The city of Des Moines and the taxpayers built that asset. But it's in our best interest to work with our neighbors because they're our biggest customers. They're the ones who are going to help keep our rates lower. Now, that doesn't mean you give them control, and it's based on our terms. But I think that I don't want to confuse people and say that it's a bad thing to start to have regional conversations, because it's not a bad thing. It actually helps the Des Moines ratepayer at the end of the day if we maintain control for Des Moines Waterworks. Sorry, you're looking at me like you want more there, but I'm just trying to.
Well, it's kind of like, we'll work with our neighbors, but we're as long as we're in control. That seems like it. I'm not sure if I were a neighbor.
I think it's the difference is, the difference here is that what was making people mad was that state legislators said, you're going to marry her, and that's just the way it's going to be. And what we're saying, wait a minute. Let us sit down and figure it out. Give us a shot to sit down and figure it out and see what's fair and equitable. If you want to break it down into layman's terms, I think that's exactly what happened. Yeah. And look, this isn't very complicated for me. I'm not an Ivy League guy. I wish I was, but I'm not. But I can tell you, when Bill Stowe filed the lawsuit against the drainage districts, you have a Republican-controlled trifecta that was not very happy with him, and they pushed back. And so we're here now on the front lines trying to sort through all this. But everybody here agrees that the Des Moines Waters is the Des Moines Waterworks, and that we want to keep our drinking water safe and clean. But I also I get to a point where you don't want to, I think it's poor leadership at this level of government to not clearly communicate what is in our control as a city council member, what is not in our control, and what the issues they should be concerned about.
I want to talk a little bit about, it seems like we've had a lot of discussion throughout this campaign of downtown versus neighborhoods. The success of downtown, we all applaud, but it seems like there's a perception that neighborhoods are being left behind. What are just a couple things, if each of you could talk about it, just a couple things where you think the city can do to improve conditions in the neighborhoods?
Certainly.
Whoever would like to go first.
I think really some of this, what the city does isn't particularly sexy. It's roads. You've got to have a better infrastructure plan. Look at Fleur. They say that it's in the pipeline to be paved in 2 years, but it's certainly a main artery to our downtown Des Moines. I think the challenge, when I first ran for the city council, they would make the argument that if a core was rotten, everything around that core would then rot. Today I would make the argument that Des Moines we have a very strong heart, but the arteries to that heart are weak. And without strong arteries, it doesn't matter how strong of a heart you have. So I think the next challenge for Des Moines is really looking at those neighborhood commercial corridors and rebuilding those corridors. And I do think they need to put more money into neighborhoods, into infrastructure, and prioritizing with public safety. I think downtown Des Moines is booming. I think this has been more successful than anybody could have ever imagined. But the question is, at some point, the question is, how much is too much to give away now? Haven't we accomplished what we wanted in building a downtown where people want to come here on the market terms? So I'm not against TIF, but the question is, it's about balanced growth. And being a blue-collar kid, it's like having the right tool for your job, right? If you had the right tool for the job, it made it so much easier. And I think that's kind of how I view it. It's that you can't say all of TIF is bad or all of it is good. It's about a balanced perspective now.
So I think the corridors are a crucial piece of this. The corridors are what connect neighborhoods to downtown and to each other. And the connectivity piece is something that is really important to get right. And so that is thinking about how you make more walkable, bikeable, transit-accessible corridors so people can get from their home to their job or from their home to childcare from their home to the other amenities that we enjoy in this community and that create a strong quality of life. Everyone should have access to that, and the corridors, I think, are key. And I think that should really be a focus of the council going forward. And we have opportunities, and each of the corridors are maybe in different places, and we have to think about what we do along those corridors a little bit differently. You know, for example, Ingersoll has been a corridor that's gotten a lot of attention and focus. There's obviously more that can still happen along Ingersoll and more that can be improved along Ingersoll. But it's thinking about what we do along some of the other corridors. Fleur is a good example. I've spent a lot of time knocking doors on the south side, and the number of people who drive down Fleur on a regular basis who raise roads as one of their top issues is much higher than just about anywhere else in the Third Ward, because those folks live it every day. Fleur Drive needs to be improved. But it's not just about the road on Fleur Drive. I also hear other pieces, right? The old ABI campus. You have a lot of folks who don't have a safe walkway to one of the gems of our community. It's not easy for them to walk just a few blocks to Grays Lake. And in the other direction, you have a great Hy-Vee that serves the south side, and it's not easy for people to walk and pick up groceries. You know, one of the things, my wife and I, we live off Ingersoll, and one of the things that we like doing is on an evening walk, we'll sometimes take the stroller in and grab just a couple items at either Price Chopper or Gateway, and that's one of those things that enhances our quality of life. Not to mention the folks who actually, it makes their life a lot easier that they can just walk to a grocery store because they don't necessarily have a car or they might only be a one-car household, and so they can break things up that way. So thinking about those type of issues as well, I think is one of the things that really can strengthen the neighborhood. And it's also an opportunity to make neighborhoods safer. When you get some of these design issues right, you can lower traffic fatalities, make it safer for people to walk down the street and make people more comfortable. And that in turn makes neighborhoods more desirable to live in and stronger. I also think another piece that we should be thinking about from a neighborhood perspective is the connection between strong neighborhoods and strong neighborhood schools. That's certainly something that people look to when they're making a decision about where they live. And even though it's not a service that the City Council controls, it's a service that residents are looking to and thinking about when they make decisions. And there's a lot that we can do from a planning perspective. And that's everything from thinking about how we plan housing. We should be thinking about making affordable housing units more accessible in our community generally, but we should think about, okay, is it connected to transit? Is it connected to other services? And that conversation should absolutely include what's going to be the impact on our school district, and are we communicating with the folks who are making planning decisions at the school board effectively, so that when we have a new multi-unit development, that the folks who live there can be served with the full range of services.
Abshir, what do you think the neighborhoods need?
I think neighborhoods are important. For me, I live downtown, and I'm reaping the benefits of the development that's happened here. I can walk 3 blocks to the downtown Hy-Vee, get my groceries, walk back to my building. But the reality, like Josh pointed out, for many residents in the neighborhoods, you have Deer Ridge on 63rd with no access to adequate busing services and no sidewalks. And they have to walk down a very dangerous and busy arterial in our community. So first of all, getting back to basics, providing sidewalks for people so they don't have to walk next to vehicles that are driving 50 miles an hour down that corridor. Fleur Drive, you have a beautiful golf course, manicured, that's eroding our road systems right there on Fleur Drive. And you have to understand that. You're pumping millions of gallons of water throughout the year. And Fleur Drive, right next to Wakanda Club right there, is one of the areas on Fleur that always has potholes, always has deterioration on the road. And on the other side, you don't even have a sidewalk for people to walk from Gray's Lake Apartment, which is a concentration of immigrants and low-income individuals in that neighborhood, to walk a couple blocks to Hy-Vee or Price Shoppers. So just getting back to the basics of providing infrastructure for people to walk to schools. I was having coffee with Connie Bozen on the school board last week, and we had a discussion about the disconnect between the City Council and the Des Moines School Board. School board finds out about developments of new apartment complexes at the final stage of development. And schools then have to somehow find a way to take an influx of 200-300 students, which causes a ripple effect in the school department. And the school district, with changing, teachers from school buildings, having to redesign buildings to accommodate these children. So Des Moines City Council and the school board, yes, they are two separate government entities, but they need to work hand in hand. And the school board does not need to know about development on the flip side. They have to be at the table whenever a developer comes in and wants to build a large community. And also on the issues of affordable housing, we can't segregate communities together in certain pockets. We need to make sure that the city is a mixed income, that you don't have a huge divide of the wealthy on one side and the poor on the other. It makes good economic sense to have mixed communities where we're making development and, providing incentives like TIF to developers, but not giving handouts. And what we can say is there's been abuse of TIF funding in this city for projects, luxury high-end boutiques, luxury hotels, and theaters where we have an issue of affordable housing. The Guardian newspaper did an article earlier this summer pointing out that we have worse affordable housing stock than Brooklyn, where you have less than 14 available units for every 100 families looking for housing. And yet the City Council is allocating TIF funding to projects that does improve the city skyline, that does make Des Moines a more attractive place for young professionals moving here, but at the cost of residents that are struggling to find affordable housing. And you can't address poverty until you address housing for individuals. So it's about increasing our bus services, working with our bus services in Des Moines and expanding routes. There was a Des Moines teacher who took a route that was less than 4 miles, and it took her about 3 hours round trip to travel less than 4 miles in Des Moines. She wanted to experience some of the difficulties her students were having. So, busing services in our community, building roads, affordable housing, and making sure that our plan to develop Des Moines is an inclusive plan, where we're bringing together high-income, low-income neighborhoods, providing opportunities, corridors for people to go shopping, for small businesses to develop, and also making sure that we're making Des Moines a progressive city, and that we're also building our skyline. We have to grow. Growth is important, but we have to have managed and inclusive growth that cuts across the spectrum for Des Moines residents. And I think that's how we can help neighborhoods and downtown continue to thrive. I'm not saying cut to funding completely and stop all projects and work in the neighborhoods and build that up. Those things can happen side by side, supporting the business community, supporting low-income individuals, and using the city's purse strings and tax financing authority to provide projects that will bolster the local economy and provide resources to those marginalized communities.
So while we're talking about development and public versus private, I'm wondering what each of you thought about the dust-up over the federal building, making a deal with the Des Moines City Council to locate on the site of the old YMCA. And some of us wondered, what's the big deal? Why does it have to go to a private developer? Isn't there enough private development going on? But they backed off. And so what did you, let's start with you, because you're...
I know we talked about this earlier this year, and at that point I haven't done a lot of research into the issue, but when I was looking at it, we have prime real estate downtown on the waterfront to have a new justice center for Des Moines, a federal justice center, and for the City Council to deny that project outright, I think it was a misstep. We have plenty of space in the city for developers to grow, and if the General Services Administration thought that plot of land was going to be useful for that building, and that money is going to come from the federal government to redevelop the site. And I think it would have been an added jewel to our downtown corridor. But developers like Hubble, who have, I believe, the contract now until next year to start developing, they have a lot of projects going on in the city. So for us to allocate that specific location and deny the General Services Administration, I think was kind of a blunder, and that we should take a look at that. But in general, development should occur in the city. We should be mindful of our skyline, and in any way we can develop the city without us having to dip into our pockets. I think we should jump on that opportunity and work with developers to develop sides of Des Moines that are blighted, that neighborhoods that are being left behind. And we have 300 properties in Des Moines that are to be condemned. They are, eyesores in neighborhoods, and they're also dangerous pockets for gang activity and also for safety for children in neighborhoods. We should be finding a way of tearing down those homes, rebuilding those neighborhoods, and providing opportunities for low-income families to purchase homes in those neighborhoods. Like Habitat for Humanity, which I volunteer with, does wonderful work in providing opportunities to first-time low-income home buyers and building housing. So it just doesn't have to be about going in and building apartment complexes and condos everywhere. It's also about infilling lots in our neighborhoods, providing revitalization to those communities. Because when a new house comes up on the block, your house's property value goes up just a little bit more versus that old dilapidated house that was burnt down or that was been abandoned 10 years ago. So we need to find ways of infilling those lots and working with developers to build single-family homes for individuals. So the discussion shouldn't just be about apartment complexes and condos and high-rises, but also how do we help these neighborhoods provide new growth and new life to these small microcosms in our neighborhoods.
So I think one of the keys to the opportunity downtown is you want something that fits the character of the downtown buildings there. You have the City Hall, the World Food Prize, the administrative building, the county administrative building, the police department. They all have a character, and one of the things that I think locating a federal courthouse at that spot would have done is been consistent with the character of that downtown area. And I think that's an important piece of the opportunity.
I'm sorry, would have been inconsistent?
Would have been consistent.
Would have been consistent.
I think they would have likely built a building that was consistent with that character. I think that can be accomplished with a private developer as well, but that should be a priority, is that we maintain that character piece. It seemed that one of the other issues at play is really the alternative location. And one of the challenges, and I think maybe why GSA didn't want the alternative location, which is also on the river, just on the other side of the river, is I think there are questions of what's at that site. It's an old Mid-American site, and certainly I get from the city's perspective, it would be nice to have the federal government engaged in a project there to help clean up that site and get that site redeveloped and help connect some of that progress in the Market District. And I think there are advantages to that. So there's a hope that site gets strong consideration if going forward, since GSA is not looking at the old Y site. And I think those are the type of considerations that come into play. And it's important that we continue that type of progress. And I think it's important that the city be honest about what they're trying to accomplish with projects like that, and why they're doing that, particularly when they agreed to a significant use of resources to, for example, think about buying out a developer. And that's part of what they agreed to get Hubble to walk away. And I think transparency in these type of decisions is a really important piece, and helping get buy-in and being honest with residents and voters about what the city is doing.
So do you agree with Abshir that the council made a mistake?
I think it's to be determined, right? I mean, it's one of those things that if in the next year we lure a really great private developer that invests and builds a building that's in character, I mean, that's what the city was going for there and what they're trying to accomplish. And if that gets accomplished, and we add a gem to the city and we grow our tax base, and then we work with GSA and get the courthouse across the river in that right location, then the city comes out looking really well. But if none of those things happen, I mean, it's one of those things. I get the calculation that was made, and I think the ultimate result will be what we evaluate the success of that on. And that's one of the challenges. I mean, the city has to make decisions all the time, not knowing, having a vision and having an idea for how it should work out and how they want it to work out. But there's always going to be some level of risk that it doesn't work out exactly as planned.
So how would you have voted if you're on the council?
You know, I probably would have, I mean, I think a key piece of that, and I don't know that I have all the information, I would have wanted to be transparent about what the motives were and the decision. And I don't know that I have that full range of information. I mean, I understand why the council did what they did. At least I think I do. But I'm not sure that a guaranteed $5 million for a parcel that was sold for substantially less than that just a year earlier is the right way to do that.
Michael, what about you?
Oh,
How would you have voted?
here we go, huh? Yeah, oh, this is fun. I'm last up. Well, I'll bring some energy to the conversation here. I'd have voted for it. I would have voted for that put agreement. It's a put agreement. And the reason that I would support it isn't because I don't think that we need a federal courthouse downtown Des Moines. It's not because I don't think they can build it to line up with the architecture. It's what we worry about with the synergy of what we have built. One thing that you can't control with federal courthouse buildings is the setback scenarios. So for security reasons and setback scenarios, they can change those at will anytime. And that means they could go out into the waterways, they can go into the streets. It all depends on what their security protocols are and setbacks. So for that reason alone, I said I don't support it, because just as we've seen over my lifetime, I went from being able to walk right in front of the White House and drive a car right in front of the White House to the roads are blocked off. And there's no governor, no one can change that. That's a federal protocol. They can change those setbacks at any time. And if they did that, imagine what could happen to that general area. Plus, if you take the very heartbeat of downtown and say, I'm going to put a federal courthouse here, does that add a lot of energy to, I mean, I'm just going to be honest, is that what we really want? Is that, you know, I want to walk by a federal courthouse every day. I mean, that's really going to pump me up. I think there's better locations, and what the city's doing here is they're betting, they're going to do what we had to do when I was on the council before, is they are trying to get them over to a new location, which will have a greater development impact for the city on an area that really needs, you know, global development. So I would have voted for it. I think it was the right decision. And if you make a wrong decision, that piece of land, how long was the YMCA up? 60 years? Yeah, so 60, you're stuck 60, 70 years. You can't take that decision back. And I'm confident in the market itself that someone's going to build on that land with subsidies, with no subsidies. And I believe we'll get the courthouse downtown too. But that's why I stand on that position the way I do.
Well, it has to be anyway.
What's that?
It has to be downtown, right? Or it has to be in the city limits anyway.
I have to go back and check. I don't know for sure.
That's a GSA guideline.
Oh, is it? Okay, I didn't.
It's a question of how much they always follow guidelines.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, Lynn. I was like, why would I want to answer a question I don't know the answer to there?
Okay. We probably have time for one question and then wrap up.
We're going to touch affordable housing. Oh,
Sure.
Anna.
Oh, no.
Or Anna's question.
Oh, so I asked Skip Moore and Connie Boson yesterday, if in 25 years, if you had your sort of pie in the sky vision for Des Moines and you could make sure that one project or one thing was accomplished for the future of the city, what would that be? And feel free for that to be sort of amorphous or think big. But I'm curious what you want in 25 years to be done. I'll start with you.
Just one project?
Yeah. Just
All right. So for me, I think that issue is about affordable housing. Because when we came to this country, my family, we had only what we had in our suitcases. We didn't have a single dollar. And we lived for the first year in a shelter. And, you know, after that, my mother was able to bring us out of poverty, working night and day, 3 jobs. And we rented an apartment, and we had government subsidies. We had Section 8 housing. And my mother was able to, you know, work constantly to help us get out of that rut that we were in. And today I'm a homeowner, you know, and I develop properties in Des Moines. And you really cannot address poverty unless you address housing. And for the longest time, we've been, saying, okay, we're going to provide people with Section 8 vouchers in a system that way, and we're going to provide, low-income housing like Oak Ridge for people. But what I want to see us do is find innovative solutions to providing home ownership for people. That was the American dream, owning a home, having roots you can set down in and say that I'm part of this community, I'm not going anywhere, and that this piece of land and that this house I own, I'm going to give this to my children. That's going to be one of the vestiges I leave behind for them. So finding a way to make every single person in Des Moines in the next 25 years, have access to housing, being a homeowner, and also addressing the issues of homelessness. I remember I was down at the Latino Heritage Festival at the Soapbox talking with people there, and I was approached by two individuals with their two dogs, and they introduced themselves and they told me that they were homeless and they were living in the woods here in Des Moines right by the Titan facility, and that they don't have access to housing. Our shelters are full every single night. I work with NISA with African women who have been in domestic situations, and finding them emergency housing is difficult for us in the city. So I think we need to have good schools, we need to have good streets, but if people don't have a stable life where they can build their wealth through home ownership, I think our city is not going to be as successful as it could be. So we need to find a way of providing housing for people, because that is the basis for economic prosperity for people in this country. Time, as it's been shown through time, that when you own a home, you start to build equity, you start to build wealth, and you become a little bit more stable. And a lot of poverty and homelessness is situational. It's because you've lost a job or you've had a health care issue and you've gone bankrupt. So finding ways for people in this country or in this city of Des Moines to be homeowners, I think that strengthens our tax base. It builds community. It builds that sense of close-knitedness in our neighborhoods and providing people with stability. And I want to see every single person in Des Moines housed in the next 25 years. I don't want to see a single person living in a homeless camp. And I think that's my goal for the city. That's my pie in the sky dream, that no one would be homeless in our community.
I'm going to go back to the corridors. So if I'm successful in on the council, and I've been engaged, is that we'll have transformation like we've seen in downtown in the last 10, 15, 20 years. We'll have that type of transformation along corridors throughout our community. So going up East 6th and over to University, or 6th rather, North and 6th, and West End University, and Ingersoll, and Fleur, and Southwest 9th. And really strengthening those corridors so that we see mixed income housing, so people of all socioeconomic backgrounds living along those corridors. So that touches, I think, a piece of affordable housing and options there, so that we preserve, Ingersoll is a corridor that has, if you talk to folks at the Polk County Housing Trust Fund, there's a lot of what they call naturally occurring affordable housing along Ingersoll and in some of those great old buildings. And we have a risk with the success that we're experiencing on Ingersoll of actually pushing out some of our existing affordable housing stock. And I don't want that to happen. And I think there are opportunities for partnership. A really good example is what's going on at the Bryn Mawr, which is on 29th Street. And the Polk County Housing Trust Fund has worked with the developer there as that building is being remodeled to preserve and set aside a number of units for low-income housing and affordable housing. And if we succeed in doing these corridors right, you create things, make them walkable, bikeable. You create opportunities for small businesses to thrive, and you'll have a range of those small businesses. You'll also have people living there, and I think we'll also see other amenities and an equity portion there. So an opportunity and something that's hopefully moving in that direction. It's thinking about something like the B-Cycle program, which has been successful downtown, and how does that expand north up 6th Avenue and getting that to serve the DMAC and United Way campus and even farther up. And the corridors are part of the answer to that too, is you connect the community and you create a more vibrant community that works for everyone if we're successful along these corridors.
I'm up. You know, I think all the bricks and mortar are going to happen. I really believe that. I think Des Moines is on the right trajectory. I think now it's about, you know, having the right leadership to continue to move it forward with a steady hand. But I see a bright future for Des Moines. I think we have a world-class city. If I could answer the question, I would say, you know, I don't know. I've run for office before. Josh has run for office before. We're all different, been different parties, but we're all neighbors. And what makes Des Moines just an amazing place is that I get a real sense of community here, unlike any other place I've ever been. And that together we can solve our problems. And it isn't what we see on the national level. It's not chaotic. There is a sense of civility in Des Moines. I've always said Des Moines is a big town, not a big city. But what drives this city are the people. It's no different than why I started the Des Moines Music Commission and tried to spawn the 8035 Festival. I believe in what Richard Florida has to say, which is in the 60s and 70s, young people follow jobs. And today, young people move to a community where they feel it's inclusive, where they feel they have a voice and a role at the table, and now jobs follow young people. And I think that does hold true. So I think it's the people. I love Des Moines. It's great. I mean, you walk down the street, you see all your friends. I mean, I went to high school with Chuck here. I mean, it's a big town, not a big city. And I love Des Moines, and I hope it never loses. I hope it loses that intangible. That's an intangible that you can't create with millions of dollars.
You want to see more people move here?
Yeah, absolutely. As long as they stay nice.
Well, the projection is that the metro area will be a million people in 25 years. So they may not all be nice. Hopefully,
I know.
Hopefully, you know, Des Moines gets its share of that million. So.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to need to wrap up. So thank you very much, and stay tuned for our coverage, and we'll be endorsing in a couple weeks. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the conversation.